Hello, my name is Terje Mikael Hasle, Joranger, and I'm the director of the Norwegian Emigrant Museum in Ottestad near Hamar, Norway. I have been director at this museum for about 2 years. Um, I am a historian. I have a PhD in migration and ethnic studies from the University of um, Oslo, and I've been working on topics related to the to the migration and uh, adaptation process among Norwegian immigrants in the United States for several years. Um, but now, so the my work at the museum uh, is very relevant to my background, and in this presentation entitled "The Norwegian Immigrant Museum: Relevance and Resources," I will present our museum and also some of our activities, um, our focus areas, and also our resources. On this photo, you see the Norwegian Immigrant Museum in the foreground, the administration building to the left, and also some of the antique buildings to your right. These antique buildings have been moved from the upper Midwest, built by Norwegian Americans, and then been moved to this site between the 1990s and 2010. And you also see a path that intersects this area to the extreme right. That is the Ottestad path, which is a very popular path for hikers in this area. And you see that the scenic beauty of this region is also striking. Uh, you see in the background, you see the Lake Mjøsa, and you see also portions of the city of Hamar uh, in the background to the right. Originally, medieval city in Norway. Um, I will get back to our location in a while. The Norwegian Immigrant Museum has a national focus in Norway. It is the only museum in Norway which concentrates fully on the migration experience. And our goal is to increase general knowledge about Norwegian immigration, return migration, and immigration, the background and the process of migration, immigrants' cultural development in the receiving country, and at large, their ties to Norway. This is to take place through the collection, conservation, research, and presentation. So these are our focal points, and we are centering around these in our activities, in our outreach, and our museum is also a research center. So we have much contact with the academic community, academic institutions, both in Norway and in the United States. And also voluntary organizations which share our focus on the Norwegian immigrant and migrant experience. I will also tell you about our history. The idea about a museum, about an immigrant museum, is more than 100 years old. It originated at the 1914 Centennial Expo at the Frogner Park in Christiania, present-day Oslo, and that year saw the celebration and commemoration of the signing of the Norwegian Constitution in 1814. So there was a big exhibit there, and one of the organizations that were present at that expo was the Nordmannsforbundet, or the Northmen's Federation, later known as Norwegians Worldwide. And several of the the members of that federation uh, talked about having a national museum that could illustrate the lives of immigrant Norwegians. Because in 1914, immigration from Norway was still significant, especially to the United States and also to Canada. So the idea was formulated, as you see on the screen, quote, to shed light on the conditions relating to life and work among our immigrants in foreign lands. End note. The Normannsforbundet was organized in 1907, and their mission was to connect the emigrated Norway, that is, immigrants in all parts of the world who were born in Norway, and that would serve as a connector in the ties between the immigrants and their homeland. So the idea of having a museum was very much central to their mission. Two world wars and economic depression followed suit, so nothing was done until after World War II. The Norwegian Emigrant Museum was established in 1955 at the Norwegian Folk Museum in Oslo, and a committee had been organized in 1940 by the Normannsforbundet, Northern Federation, to start the planning of moving log building from the United States, a log building built by Norwegians, to Oslo, to the Folk Museum. A new committee was formed in 1952, consisting of the Northern Federation and also the Bygdelagenes Fellesråd and the a representative from the Norwegian Consulate General in Minneapolis. And they were able to find a log building in Ingrid, North Dakota, through one of the members of the Norwegian American Line who knew about this house. It had been used as Sons of Norway Lodge for lodge meetings in Kindred. The house was dismantled. It was shipped to Oslo and rebuilt there. In 1972, this building and also another building that had been added in the 1960s moved to Hamar because there was no space left at the Folk Museum. They had intended to establish this a yard made out of Norwegian American buildings, but the idea turned out to be to not be practical. So the Norwegian American buildings had to be moved outside of Oslo, and the decision was that they were moved to Hamar, and they became a part of the large museum, the regional museum of Domkirkeodden in Hamar. In 1988, the museum became an independent unit. Today it is consolidated and it makes part of the Anno Museum, formerly the Hedmark Museum. And but the buildings were moved from the museum, the Hedmark Museum or the Domkirkeodden, to a location near the lake. As you see here, this photo is taken in 1995. A big flood that year was very actually affected the buildings because the water rose to a certain level. So the leadership of the museum had to find a new location where these buildings could be moved to avoid such situations in the future. In 1996, the museum moved from Hamar to Ottestad in Stange. And the reason is that the local county, the Hedmark County, was the owner of a number of institutions that now were vacated due to a law that said that the users of those institutions should move back to their home municipalities. So these institutions were vacated. Institutions also had large acreage around them, and the museum was able to buy one of these units. And so the buildings were moved across the lake, and the acreage, we have about 7 acres here, made it possible to expand our operations in the future. The museum makes part of Anno Museum. Anno Museum is the organization of which we make part. There are 6 large museums in Hedmark, we're the smallest. But the owner, judicial owner of the museum, is a foundation. And the foundation is the owner of the acreage, the buildings, and also the museum collections. And the collections, we'll get back to that a little later, but we have a main building and then 8 antique buildings. And these buildings have been moved from the US to Norway between 1955 and 2010. The museum has a sister organization in the United States, the Norwegian Emigrant Museum Incorporated, which is a non-profit organization and which also channels funding from Norwegian American individuals and organizations to the museum. It is operated by the statutes of the state of Minnesota, and they have an account presently in Decorah, Iowa, also a very Norwegian American town. So we also hope to gather some funding for our museum operations in the future, and this non-profit organization is very important for us. We have 3 full-time employees, 1 part-time employee, 2 assistants, and also several volunteers. I will mention that the local Sons of Norway Lodge, the Hamar Lodge, is very active at the museum. They participate as volunteers during summers and also assist us in other ways. And we also have Friends of the Museum organization who also assist us to a large extent. In 2019, we were partners in an internship program with the Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah, with 2 students who were here as part of their history program. They were helpful in creating Norwegian, an English website, English language website. They organized a 4th of July celebration and also created a genealogy resource guide for genealogists based on the resources that we have at the museum. In 2021, we will be hosts for Fulbright recipient Miranda Moen. She originally comes from the Spring Grove area in Minnesota, and her focus is building techniques, regional building techniques from the areas of Gudbrandsdalen, Østerdal, Valdres, and Numedal, and to which extent these traditions were brought over to Norwegian communities in the Midwest. So a very interesting project. She will stay with us for 10 months next year, or she will have we will host her for 10 months, and she will do a lot of field work here, and also will be taking classes at the architectural college in Oslo. Our activities are multiple. We organize educational activities for pupils and adolescents. We receive classes here, um, uh, pupils of different ages, and we cooperate with the teachers in creating activities that are relevant to their curriculum. We also produce physical and digital exhibits um, where we focus on projects that relate to Norwegian emigration, return migration, and immigration. That is a part of our outreach program. We cooperate with various artists, musicians, and dance troupes who perform activities on the museum grounds. Next year, we will have a musical here based on a manuscript written by a local poet, Ingeborg Grefling Hagen. Every other year, we have dance troupes here, dance troupes from Hamar, and they perform dances along the path that I mentioned, and also in some of our buildings. And 2 years ago, we had more than 1,000 people here in one evening, the public, the visitors were many. So we hope now this year we don't know yet with the COVID-19, but we hope that it could be a tradition on our museum site. We have cooperation with institutions of higher learning, both in the United States and in Norway, and we think that this connection to the academic community is important as well, because we also focus on research here at the museum. The Norwegian Emigrant Museum has taken a national initiative in Norway to launch a bicentennial commemoration of Norwegian immigration in 2025. In 1825, the sloop Restoration left the harbor of Stavanger, bound for New York, with the first direct immigrant party from Norway to the United States. And after them, about 1 million immigrants followed afterwards. But immigration today is a largely neglected topic in a contemporary discourse about immigration and integration. So we hope to lift topic from the shadows and to make it more relevant, not the least in order to use our knowledge about Norwegian immigration to the United States to understand processes and dynamics connected to the present day immigration to Norway from various cultures. Our focal points toward 2025 is then to create an awareness about immigration from Norway in a national collective consciousness, and to exhibit this forgotten chapter of Norwegian immigration to new generations, both here in Norway and also in the United States, because there are connections between families. In many cases, the connections between families on both sides of the Atlantic are no longer in existence, have been forgotten. So this is maybe a good way to promote this contact again. We also wish to display the relevance of the immigrant experience, both in the United States among Norwegians and in other immigrant countries, to the debate about contemporary immigration to Norway. I think that this is a fruitful connection. And I also think that this knowledge about Norwegian immigration could add a nuance to partly polarized debate on contemporary immigration in Norway. We are in the process of organizing a board, a national board, which will coordinate activities in Norway toward 2025, and to establish a network of researchers to apply for funding for migration-related projects. We just sent an application to the Ministry of Culture for funding for a secretariat here at the museum, which will serve as a coordinator between these activities toward 2025, because we anticipate that this will be a broad commemoration that will take place in practically all municipalities, organized by local historical societies, volunteer associations, but also initiated by national institutions like the Norwegian National Library, universities, and the Parliament. We will produce a large permanent exhibit. This exhibit will both be physical and digital, and the focus will be on Norwegian immigration to all corners of the world, but the United States will be very central in this exhibit. We just received funding from the Sons of Norway Foundation for a digital exhibit on the history of the Sons of Norway, the founding of the Sons of Norway, and also its impact in its host countries, US, Canada, and in Norway. And we're working on that project right now. We wish to refurbish the building and to turn it into a timely, attractive museum and integrate the main entrance to the outdoor museum in a better way than what exists today. The museum is also relevant. It's important that we keep relevant in society, because as an institution with a national outreach, national focus, we are in a position to define, influence, and also to lay premises for our understanding of history and the future. And as an institution of knowledge, I think it's very important that we ask questions and that we share knowledge and insights which may be influential to the development of society. It's also important to be critical, to have a critical approach to what we perceive as Norwegian immigrant history, and also about the role of immigration history in society. I wish to present a book that was recently published, The Nordic Whiteness and Migration to the USA, a historical exploration of identity. I'm one of the editors and also one of the authors of this anthology. It was launched at an event here at the museum on August 26th, which was streamed, and the presentations are now available on our museum website. And it portrays Nordic immigrants, a privileged group of immigrants. They were white, and they were highly regarded by the Anglo-American elite as an immigrant group. And this is one of the contributions of this book to the field is that it is written by the privileged. Formerly, books on whiteness and privilege and race have been written by groups who suffered injustice and who were discriminated against. But now this book is written by the members of the privileged group itself. And it's a study of how the concept of whiteness has influenced the identities, self-perceptions, and the process of integration among Nordic immigrants into the American hierarchies, the hierarchical society in the 19th and 20th century. Hierarchies that were highly racialized um, and where color was very significant to understand your position in society. And this is a relevant publication, not least in light of the killing of George Floyd in South Minneapolis in May of 2020, this year, and also the contemporary debate on racism and discrimination. And this debate is also ongoing in Norway. Right. So this is an example of how the museum can be relevant, and we also wish to include this these hierarchies and whiteness as part of our outreach to the public as well. We have to dare to ask questions and to be critical about these matters, I think. I now wish to turn to the type of sources, source material that we find at the Norwegian Emigrant Museum. Here is an iconic painting. It's the sailing of the Restoration in 1825 from the harbor of Stavanger. You can see the Restoration, the sailing vessel to your left in the background, and you see people waving. We don't know if this was what actually happened, but this is a stylistic impression by the painter. And you see here the source material that exists here at the museum, and I will go through this to this material in a moment. As a museum, we focus on material culture. So we have about 2,000 registered artifacts, ranging from trunks, immigrant trunks, as you see here, to inventory from various houses. We received a schoolhouse from Letcher, South Dakota, some years ago, and Richard Christopher, who was a donor, he also gave the museum a lot of books, and also the furniture. The schoolhouse was completely furnished. So we have a lot of artifacts from there, and also we have uniforms from the Spanish-American War, from 2 world wars, and various smaller artifacts that relate to the Norwegian-American experience. The antique buildings themselves also both constitute an exhibit in itself, an outdoor exhibit, but they also serve as artifacts to tell us about how Norwegian Americans adapted to the new society. 5 of the buildings are built by first-generation Norwegian Americans, and the 3 buildings that you see on this photo are built by second and third generation Americans after their families had adapted to the new environment. In the middle, you see the Bjorgo House from Highlandville, north of Decorah, Iowa. The Lee Christopher Schoolhouse from Letcher, South Dakota, to your left. And in the background, the former Oak Ridge Lutheran Church from Houston, Minnesota, in the vicinity of Spring Grove. And the church is also used for larger concerts, events. The book launch took place there, and 3 years ago, a CD was recorded there by a local group who performed immigrant songs. We have about 9,000 American letters written by Norwegian immigrants and their offspring to relatives and friends in Norway, ranging from the 1850s to the 1960s. And this form a very good primary source to understand how people fared, with detail about their voyage, about their about everyday life. And American Letters is also a way to present individuals who are not mentioned in other sources. Among others, women writers are important here because they do not necessarily appear in other source material. For a long time, farm property was the man's property, and it was usually a very male dominated society. They were the active. There were those who were presented in the source material. So I think that this is a very democratic source. We have about 20,000 photos, and I say photos can tell much about the time that they were taken. Here you see a group of Norwegian Americans, and you see the styles, the clothing styles at the time. So photos also is one of our important sources. We have microfilm reels from about 2,000 Norwegian American Lutheran congregations, and as you see here, also from microfilm reels from federal census records from states where Norwegians were quite numerous. Here you see also overview of one of the reference pages to our North Dakota congregations. You see the location to the left, and also the affiliation, the church affiliation, ALC, the city, the closest city or town, and also the time period for membership represented on that reel or film, and also the church records. That is the baptisms, confirmations, weddings, and burials. And sometimes also they include minutes from church meetings. The Rubric File is a collection of microfiche with copies, biographical information from obituaries in Norwegian American newspapers, covering the time period 1916 to 1960, which also is a very good source to locate individuals. So there are clippings from numerous Norwegian American newspapers that have been put on microfiche. I would say that we have not digitized our collections, so this is something that we will emphasize in the years to come. So digitalization would mean very much to reach out to a larger audience. But so far, people have to come here and to ask questions so that we can convey the information that they ask for. Our project about the returned immigrants is also a project that has not been that has been neglected in the migration history research. We have questionnaires and cassettes with about 900 interviews with immigrants and returned immigrants that were recorded about 1990. And they cover the immigration experience for a long time. So it has been a little used, relatively. There has been few people have used those in projects or in dissertations. So I think that this is a very important source. The Normannsforbundet, or Norwegians worldwide, um, gave birth to the museum in many ways. Later they donated their archives to the museum, and we have several treasures here. Among others, we have a clipping archive. It is not digitized. It contains a lot of clippings from various Norwegian American newspapers from about 1910 to the interwar period. Here you see a clipping from the visit of the St. Olaf College Choir to Norway in 1913, and the various articles about their visit. And I think that this clipping archive is built up in such a fashion that it's built up by topic, so that you will find various articles on the same topic um, um, located in the same book. Um, we also have the personal archives of the Normannsforbundet, which focuses on individuals. And here is an article about Axel Holter, called the father of, he was one of the founders of the American Skiing Association, a pioneer. I have never heard about him. So this is important to get to know people who may be forgotten today. In the 1930s, the Normannsforbundet had a questionnaire that they sent out to members who lived all around the globe, and asked them about their ties to Norway. And this is also an interesting source, which then lists the name of the person, the person's position, and Norwegian American organizations, or Norwegian organizations that the person is active in, and also how they regard their ties to Norway. This is a very interesting archive, and it's also it's not so well known. We have a large library of about 15,000 books and about an equal number of journals related to the topic of migration, and it's called the Ingrid Sammickson's Library. You see a photo of Ingrid Sammickson. She was a Norwegian migration scholar, the great scholar who imported she was the founder of the migration as an academic field in Norway, and also was influential in establishing that field in the Nordic countries. And she's still regarded as a star in migration history. She was the first Norwegian female professor, university professor as well. So she broke new ground. And she's from Stange. She's from this municipality. So both the road leading to the museum and also our library is named after her. We also go about to give tips and we give advice to genealogists about how to find relatives in the United States. And here are a few examples. You make, and it is about connecting various sources, to link various sources to one another. For instance, you may enter the digital archives Those are this is a Norwegian run website with a lot of records. Among others, it contains immigrant records, it has church records, military records, etc. And you may compare the information listed in the immigrant records with US registers. For instance, to link, if you were looking for a certain person who left Norway after 1916, you may connect the immigrant records with the obituaries in the Rubric File, for instance, in order to find out the migration, the lifespan of that person, life story. You may also cross-reference the immigrant records in the digital archives with Norwegian American sources, like the Martin Ulvestad Nordmenn i Amerika, published in the early 1900s. His books give an overview about Norwegian settlement areas in the United States, but also has a more detailed list of Norwegian rural communities and towns and immigrants in America who hail from these areas. So the bygdelags in the United States, they would be a good source if you're interested to connect Norwegian immigrant records and to find out where these people settled. If you hail from the Gudbrandsdal region, you may contact the Gudbrandsdalslag. If you hail from the Telemark region, you may contact the Telelag, etc. The Bygdelagens Fellesråd have made a brochure that is shown here. It states explore your Norwegian roots, and I think that there are about 30 or so Bygdelags today, which represent various regions in Norway from which people immigrated. You may also cross-reference immigrant protocols in the digital archives and source material in the Normannsforbundets archive. Here is the Normannsforbundet. They issued a journal several times a year, and here is a write-up about the Belmont settlement in North Dakota, in the Red River Valley. And you will see a listing of names of individuals here. We also have an archive with where we have entered information manually, and to your left you will see a person named Bergljot Lindberg Diker, and the location is in New York. She is mentioned in several of these volumes, which make part of the Normannsforbundets archive. So we were able to find information about individuals in this manner. I mentioned the genealogy reference guide that was made by the students from UIU in Provo, Utah, and they give an interesting insights into which sources are available here at the museum in immigration history, and also link them to the migration process itself, a historic timeline. So it contextualizes these sources into a historical facts. And Friends of the Museum offers service for genealogists here, and this reference guide will be available on the museum website. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.